So, you want to become a factory expert? Well, look no more. In Arknights Endfield, building and managing your base is far from optional. The Automated Industry Complex, or your AIC, is a core pillar of the game. It becomes one of the most satisfying systems in the entire experience. Think of your AIC as your personal factory operations hub. It runs production lines automatically, and even when you're out exploring, just like in games such as Factorio or Palworld, progress continues in the background. Raw materials are refined into gear, medicine, food, explosives, and every other essential resource that your account needs. Your base directly controls your progression. The equipment your operators rely on comes here. The supplies for tougher challenges come from here. The game pushes you to engage with base building, and once you understand how everything connects, it all starts to make sense. At the very beginning, the game will funnel you into mining originium ore. That's normal. This is the entry point and into the entire factory loop. But as you advance, your mindset needs to shift from just mining to producing higher value items. That's where your AIC truly opens up. And to understand that shift, you first need to know how the production actually works. And how the production lines work is that every facility has an input and output slots. You start by setting up your PAC, the central building, to output a resource. From there, you connect that output to another facility's input. Then you continue chaining outputs to inputs, either into more facilities or back to the PAC. What this creates is a continuous production loop. Resources move from one stage to the next, get refined, and then the finished product ends up in your depot. Once this is set up, the system runs on its own. Your job is no longer to do the work, it's designed to flow efficiently. And that flow depends entirely on one thing: power. Power is one of the first systems you'll encounter, and it affects both your base and your exploration. Many gates and ancient devices in the world won't function unless they are powered. That power comes from your PAC or a sub-PAC at an outpost, and is distributed through relay towers, which connects to electric pylons that supply nearby facilities. So here's the basic loop. Start a connection from the PAC or an existing tower. Place another tower within 80 meters. That tower can now power pylons, and pylons wirelessly supply power to nearby buildings. You'll use this constantly to reach remote mining sites and reactivate dormant structures across the map. So keep these rules in mind. The 80-meter limit is a straight line distance. Terrains often forces zigzag paths. You can connect from unpowered towers to build the grid in reverse. Towers can power world devices directly. Mining rigs require pylons. Inside your main base, pylons connect automatically. Each map has a protocol capacity limit, but you'll rarely hit it in normal play. Now here's the part where most new players will run into: power limits. Most facilities in Enfield require power to function. Your base has a fixed power capacity, and if your total usage exceeds it, your entire AIC drops into a low power state. Production slows or stops completely. This is where thermal banks come in. Thermal banks increase your power capacity by burning fuel, but fuel is not automatic. You must feed it manually. The most efficient early game fuel is originium ore, because it is extremely common and easy to mine in bulk. Early on, you should set up at least 2 SC battery production lines and connect them to your thermal banks. Each SC battery provides around 515 power, giving you enough headroom to expand without constantly falling in low power. Once power is stable, that's when the real automation begins. And automation depends on one core system: mining. Mining is the backbone of your entire factory. Early in the game, you are asked to collect resources by hand, and that's fine at first, but it doesn't scale. Mining rigs solves this problem. Once powered, they automatically extract ore and send it straight to your depot. And as you progress, you unlock new ore tiers. Originium ore, starter resource for basic construction. Amethyst ore, used for gear and mid-tier materials. And Ferrium ore, high-tier ore in Valley 4 for advanced outposts. Each new ore unlocks stronger production chains and more advanced factories. In other words, every tier of mining directly expands to what your AIC is capable of producing. And that's the rhythm of Enfield's factory system. You stabilize power, you automate mining, you unlock better materials, and those materials let you build a stronger, more efficient base. And from there, everything else in the game becomes easier. So the real question becomes, what should you be producing? Before we answer that, there's one quick concept that you need to understand because it affects everything: outposts. In simple terms, an outpost is wherever your AIC is placed. That's it. Wherever your AIC sits, that area becomes your outpost. And why does that matter? Because your factory production should always be planned around the needs of the specific location. Once you think about the production in terms of your outpost, everything starts to make a lot more sense and planning becomes way easier. Now the question will be, what should you produce by early stages of the game? Instead of guessing, it helps to think of production in tiers. Early game, your focus should be on Origio Crust, amethyst parts, and buck capsule C and B, the highest valued item. These are cheap, efficient, and constantly needed when expanding factories. As you move into mid-game, your priority shifts to SC and LC batteries, both green and blue. These are higher value items that support more advanced systems, such as generators used to power your AIC. They also sell for a high amount of stock builds, making them especially valuable. And in Endgame, production is all about purple batteries and buck capsule A. These are expensive, slow to make, and extremely important for late game progression because these sell for a huge amount of stock builds that will heavily be tied to upgrading your factory's expansion. Now there's one item that deserves special attention: bombs. You should have at least 50 bombs, or preferably more. A lot of exploration content, especially in Valley 4, requires bombs to progress. If you don't have them, you'll constantly be forced to stop and backtrack. Later regions like Wuling will have their own exploration tools such as water balls, which are easier to manage, but early on, bombs are non-negotiable. As your factory grows, you'll also want to start stockpiling amethyst parts and origura crust. These are used to build and expand more factory items. The buffer saves you from constant production interruptions when you want to expand. Now let's talk about efficiency, because this is where a lot of players accidentally sabotage their own factory. The key rule is simple: match input exactly to demand. If a machine needs 1 unit of item, you only connect 1 belt. Connecting 3 belts does nothing except waste resources and create bottlenecks. If a factory needs 2 units of item A and only 1 unit of item B, then just make sure that item A is supplied twice of the rate of item B. That's how you keep your production running smoothly. The same logic applies at higher numbers. If something needs 15 of one item and 10 of the other, producing 2 lines of the higher demand item will massively improve efficiency. To understand why this works, you need to know how belts function. Think of belts and Enfields as pipes with a fixed speed limit. One belt moves 1 item every 2 seconds. That's 0.5 items per second. And over 10 seconds, a belt can move 5 times total. So in practical terms, 1 belt, 1 item every 2 seconds, 1 belt up to 5 items every 10 seconds. That means a single belt is enough for any machine that consumes 1 item every 2 seconds or 5 items every 10 seconds. So adding more belts will not make the machine faster, it can only consume the rate it was designed for. For example, if a machine needs 1 unit of iron every 2 seconds, 1 belt is perfect. If it needs 3 units every 10 seconds, 1 belt is still enough. If it needs 6 units every 10 seconds, now 1 belt isn't enough and you need 2 production lines to feed it. And that is the core rule. Match belt supply to machine demand. Belts are not boosters. They are pipes with a fixed flow rate. Once you understand that 1 belt equals 5 items per 10 seconds, you can instantly tell whether the setup is efficient or bottlenecked. Now that you understood the belt flow, the next tool you'll need is the AIC report. This tells you whether your factory is actually performing the way you think it is. Here's what each section means. Yield, what you intend to produce. Cost, how much resource and time that production consumes. Current data, what your base is actually producing right now. Theoretical data, the maximum output your setup could reach if everything was perfect. The most important comparison is current versus theoretical. If your current output is far lower than the theoretical one, something is wrong. Usually a bottleneck, missing input, or a power issue. Before expanding or changing production, always check the AIC report. It tells you where you're losing efficiency and what needs fixing. Think of it as a control panel for your entire factory. Ignore it and you'll waste time and resources without realizing why. So the real question becomes, do you have to engage with all of this? You don't need to optimize the AIC perfectly. If base building isn't your style, you can keep things simple. Early setups are easy and you can copy layouts from other players. However, ignoring the system entirely will hurt you later. Higher gear is required for endgame content, and that gear comes from your factory. The good news is that basic setups are enough for most players. Deep optimization is optional. The AIC is a core part of Arknights Endfield. It powers your combat, unlocks exploration, and drives long-term progression. Start small, focus on early tier systems, and don't worry about perfect efficiency. Once your production lines are running, the system works for you. Step by step, your factory will quietly support everything you do across the game. And the factory rewards players who think ahead. So if you get the math right early, everything else becomes easier. And that's everything you need to get started with the factory. If this helped, leave a like, share with your friends, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.